This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
Welcome to the Spirit Sessions podcast. I'm your guide, Katie Silcox, bringing you your weekly self-love soundbite. Join us, where I'll help you find your true spiritual home, where every single aspect of you is holy ground. Holy ground.
This is a journey into sound.
This is a Spirit Session podcast with Katie Silcox. Venga chicos, empezamos.
Hey you guys, we have a really special podcast for you today. We are going to be back with one of my favorite teachers, mentors, Cristal Mortensen. She is just one of my favorite humans. And she was recently our special guest in Spirit Sessions this month at the Shakti school. And I wanted to share the first part of her talk with you. It was just so profound, and her work has really impacted my life. And so, yeah, the sound quality won't be exactly perfect because it's a Zoom workshop, but I'm sure you can hear it enough to get everything you need out of it. Also, as you know, level 1 coming up January 2022, and I am just so ever more convinced at this practice's ability to do one really important thing, and that is to reconnect us with the sense of who we really are. And that really solves the first and most important problem of our lives, right? We're disconnected from ourselves. And so even though, yes, this is an Ayurveda certification course, the more I think about what is actually happening is this is a place where people are learning how to tap into who they really are and to move from that place. So I really hope you'll join us if you haven't done level 1. We would love to see you there. All right, beautiful people, enjoy this incredible talk with Cristal Mortensen. We have such an incredible special guest today. It's really my intention with this subscription program to every single month make it really what I would consider to be cutting edge and juicy and relevant to what's going on in my life. And when I do that, what I find is that it tends to also be what's going on in many of the lives of the people who are a lot like me. And so I'm just really excited about Spirit Sessions. I'm excited about the subscription program. It's a wonderful opportunity to be together in real time and to bring you guys some really special people. So today we have a very special guest, and I'm not sure if she is on yet, but before we dive in with Cristal Mortensen, I want to just take a moment to kind of tune in together. So wherever you are, go ahead and just let your eyes close, find a comfortable position. And what I would like for you to do is remember this is the potential of really sacred time together. And so just really feeling like you can do whatever you need to hold that intention and to close whatever windows, maybe put your phone on silence, shut the door, whatever you need to do, take this moment now as we begin to really invoke sacred time. And without trying to control your breath, see if you can gently let the next inhale guide you down to the belly space. And just feel from the belly, you can let the next inhale without you trying guide you down the legs. And then when you feel the next inhale happen without you trying, just feel like it can guide you down to the soles of your feet. And then as you feel the next inhale happen, feel that it can guide you from the soles of your feet into that relationship with gravity, into the earth. And then just continue to really feel that downward flow as we begin to ground into this present moment. And we'll just call in an intention. And so for me, it's something like all these sweet love forces that can benefit us. May they please be here with us today. Whatever your connection is to divinity, spirit, God, whatever word feels right for you, just feel you can with a real heartfelt sense of affection invite that into your body and into this room that we're creating virtually. Good. So keep that sense of safety and calm and notice it in your body as you keep it, but you can start to open the eyes and we'll come back into the room. So before I bring Crystal on, just a little bit about her. You know, she has training in so many areas, and I don't need any convincing about Crystal's training because I've been working with her personally for the past 3 years, and I don't care about someone's training if what we do together works, right? Because I'm a tantrika, and one of the definitions of tantra is whatever works, and I love that. But when I did start looking Crystal up, I was like, wow, she studied anatomy and physiology. She was a pre-med major. She has studied so many different things. She's a nervous system specialist. She's a somatic neuroplasticity expert. She has such an incredible knowledge of esoteric philosophy and spirituality. And she is deeply learned in the general workings of the brain, and is particularly in the relationship between our brains and our nervous systems and how we wire for attachment when we're little girls and little boys. And, you know, and more, right? I could go on and on about Crystal's bio. And she does this all with such a sense of kindness and compassion. And one of my longings is to bring forward these deep and great thinkers to you guys. And so, Crystal, welcome to Spirit Sessions. Thank you for being here on this early Hawaii morning for you.
Thanks, Katie. It's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me to talk about, what, is what I believe and what I've experienced to be just so incredibly helpful, both in my own journey of, healing, but also, self-development, and my own learning. And also what I found to be really, really helpful for the folks I work with. And really nice to get to bring it here to all of you in this format. And just been, as Katie was guiding all of us in this really lovely practice of arriving here, just been sort of trying to drop in with the group and kind of feel into all of you and kind of get a feeling of like the field we're creating together, especially because our topic today is safety. And so this sense of like this kind of forming for us here today, of a sense of hopefully the sense of a growing sense of safety individually, but also together here as a group, because because we're human animals, as many of you might know, that when we are kind of linked in a field or a group together, and it doesn't really matter if we're like together sitting in a group or we're many, many miles away, that our nervous system, our energetic system, our being is going to be responding to and feeling the safety of those that are in that like net, right, in that matrix. And so today we're all here with this intention to come together and work with, cultivating access to a greater sense of safety for ourselves. So each one of us that feels that in any moment, it's going to ripple through the whole field. So I just want to really name how powerful it is. Sometimes I think when we're alone and we're doing our inner work or the working through the hard stuff that happens in our lives or in the world around us, sometimes we can, kind of lose sight of what we're contributing, by having those moments of safety that transforms our own body, our own mind, our own energy system. And that actually is a really profound effect, especially as we link together in that. So I just want to really encourage everybody to, if that does feel available, to sort of see if you can notice a bit of this kind of group intention that hopefully as we work together today, can start to even kind of grow and develop as we hopefully travel a little deeper and deeper into a felt sense of both safety, but also connection. So I just want to kind of have that be a bit of our foundation, or offer that as a possible way to start to drop in today.
Yeah, one of the things I would love to kind of maybe start with, Cristal, is just a little bit of background for those of the students that aren't aware. I spent, as many are aware, 21 years in the yoga and meditation world, and have a meditation practice every single day of my life, very dedicated, and that's beautiful. And yet there was something really, really missing from that story. And I kind of had been sold a false bag of goods, in the sense that, as a young woman, 19, 20, starting yoga and meditation, I was like, oh, this is going to save me. This is going to heal me on every level. And it was so wonderful for me on so many levels. But when I was in my 30s and into my 40s, I kind of had to humbly admit that meditation and yoga alone wasn't solving all of my issues. And not that we're ever solved or fixed, but one of the, and I began to work with different folks, and you're one of them. But one of the things that was really important that you taught me, really, you were the first, was the state of safety being primordial in this unraveling of what I had learned is called karma. And we'll get into this a little later, but in other systems we call trauma. We could argue that they could be used in similar ways. And so maybe, if it feels right to you, just starting off, what is the state of safety, and really, why does it matter? Why is safety so important? And if it is, it's like, why isn't every yoga and meditation and therapist teacher in the country or world speaking about this, and from a scientific perspective, as well as a spiritual perspective? And I know there's a lot in there.
Yeah, there is a lot. I think the good news is it's becoming, especially as there's so much more awareness of trauma, and that we're sort of all gone through a bit of a collective trauma, recently. There's so many layers of that. It's not new, but it's really in the foreground. And because of that, and because of, folks just really not feeling safe, through this time. And it's been like just so pushed to the surface, that it is becoming a lot more of the mainstream conversation, is starting to be more and more, it's making its way in. And I think there's so much more understanding, a growing understanding of, trauma, but also of like, trauma, not just as events that happen, but trauma as like living in a state of stress and survival physiology where we don't feel regulated, like where we're in anxiety a lot, or maybe we're having sleep issues, or maybe we're feeling depressed or shut down, or, isolated or alone, or maybe we're having body symptoms, like maybe we're having pain or illness, the kind of chronic types that are just sort of like harder to treat. So as there's, kind of more and more of that kind of being pushed to the surface, that we sort of have to start reckoning a bit with like, okay, what's going on here? It's not just one person or one, portion of the population or one area, or just like disease, genetic disease or something like that, that we've got there's something bigger going on here. And so when we think about, what safety is, like if we're looking from the standpoint of physiology, there is a physiological, state of safety that's in the, it's the nervous system is what is kind of like tracking for that, right? The nervous system is what's saying, oh yeah, that's dangerous, that's safe. And it's not always relative to the thing. It's not objective. Some things are. Some things are just inherently, that's dangerous, right? Some things, are a little more inherently, okay, that's safety, in terms of like the content or the thing that we're in, relationship in the environment. But it's very subjective. What makes us feel safe, or what tags that feeling of that's danger? And that does kind of loop back to like our conditioning and karma and what's happened to us in our life, that things are now associated in our nervous system with like, okay, that's reminding me of something unsafe, something that was dangerous, something that was harmful, or harmed me, or created suffering or distress. And so it is very personal, but there is a pretty, there's this universal, because we all have this kind of similar setup. Our biology is that our nervous system is taking in information, in the environment, as well as internal signals. And then that's getting sort of processed through our nervous system. And if it gets tagged with like, okay, that's dangerous, well, that's going to, or we're not sure, that's going to create a physiological response, right, in the brain. But then that's also going to affect all the body systems, right? We all, at this point, most folks know about the stress response on some level, and how that's actually really hard on our bodies and our brains over time. And a lot of both just kind of, it could be like we emotionally don't feel well, or mentally we're maybe, like not feeling very balanced, or it could be our physiology, we don't feel good in our body or our body state, or we're having some kinds of symptoms. There's a lot of ways that can manifest. The ripple effect of that, state of danger and threat in the body. And it can really come from anywhere. It can come from our past and our thoughts and our feelings. It can come from something around us. But basically, our nervous system is always tracking for that. And so when we actually are, if we're thinking of the state of safety, it's where our nervous system is deciding, which without our input, most of the time, it's not like we're like, I've decided this is safe, I've decided this is dangerous. It's really supposed to be automatic, right? Like our nervous system response, if it's not automatic, if we need to think about it, then there's too much of a gap between what's happening in our response. And that wouldn't be very good for our survival, because if something was dangerous and we had to kind of sit back and think and wonder about it, it's like too late. So these things are very, like, they happen just without our consent most of the time. So when our nervous system has, deemed, this input or the situation or the internal situation as safe, that's going to bring on this different physiology, which is basically the main physiological, neurological pathway in the body of safety is the vagus nerve. Right, so that's a cranial nerve. It exits at the brain stem, and then it travels. It innervates the face and the vocal cords, the heart and lungs, down into the digestive system, all the organs. It basically pretty much runs everywhere. We even have a branch of it down, down at the sacrum. So we've got it has these far-reaching connections into like all our body systems. And so when there's the nervous system deems that there's safety, that vagus nerve is going to be kind of more open. It's going to be more available. It's going to be more on. If we have that over time, there's more tone in the vagal system. So it's going to be working better. And so the communication between our brain and our body is going to be kind of running well. It's like that back and forth is going to be harmonic. It's going to be like, hey, we're okay, we're safe. It's okay to digest our food. If we're unsafe, digestion, not important. So that goes on the side, because if we're going to die, doesn't matter if we digest our lunch, so all that is like on everything that gets back burnered when we're under threat, gets to come back online. And so all our organs, all our systems are going to function really differently when that safety physiology is turned on. Also, what happens is the brain operates differently. So under threat, certain parts of the brain are going to come on in a really heightened way to help us with our survival. But other functions are going to not be as important in those moments. So those kind of also get backburnered. Now, what can happen over time is that then, if that's happening chronically, there are certain areas of the brain that then they have less, kind of wiring available for those pathways. So those pathways get weaker, and those other pathways are going to get stronger. And then they're going to become more, they're just going to keep running on their own, more dominant. And then what that does is when we're more in a danger physiology, the brain's not working as a whole anymore. It's not integrating, right? And so we think of integration, it's this, everything being linked, but also differentiated and working in this harmonic way together. And we can think of that as happening, it happens in the brain and the nervous system, but it happens in all the systems. So when we think of integration in a bigger sense of just physiological, it's that, all the systems are working together in this integrated harmonic way where everything's linked, but also differentiated in these like helpful ways. And also, if we think about it in a larger sense of, we're not just a body, right? We're not just physiology. It's that all our systems, all the aspects of us are now integrated. So like our body and what's happening, physically in the realm, the human realm here, what's happening in our emotions, and our emotional body, what's happening in our mental body, what's happening in our heart, what's happening in our intuition, what's happening in our connection with the divine, like with our soul, how are we connected to that? So there's this, how are we connected to our path, but also our past? There's so many layers to us that if we're thinking of integration on this, kind of a more meta scale, it's that all aspects of us are online, they're all working together, they're communicating with each other in a balanced way. So we can have this double map of the sort of physiological body systems, having that. And then that sets this really nice template where that integration of all these other parts working together harmoniously, then that's going to be a lot more available. So I always think of it as these systems they're really interlinked and they kind of map on each other. What's really hard is that bigger map that's really about our growth, our development, our path, why we're here, our evolution. that's going to get really limited if the physiological map is like dysregulated, right? If that isn't working together, the other is going to be a lot harder to access. So that's why if we can really help to create that integration in our like physiology and those systems, it's a lot easier. It's like that's going to speak to all these aspects of us, and then those can be in a communication too. They can like feed into each other and work together. So that's kind of a lot of information. But that's when I think of integration, that's kind of gives us our like foundational map of that.
Yeah. And what immediately comes to mind with you and I always when I'm working with you and is this overlay between or the connection between what the ancients say about a chakra, for example, being a convergence of energy meeting old story, meeting our physiology, and that the setup, so for many of us, if not all of us, right, the setup from day one where the vagal nerve began to lose tone, or the connections between what was safe and what wasn't safe, what our physiology and how it created that and mapped that into our structure unconsciously, how despite our best conscious efforts as adults, we may be working with some karma, aka trauma, aka things that have been stored in the system that are making the system fire in a way where things that actually aren't safe in your life, things that, are safe in your life may not even be getting registered with the system, whereas things in your life that may be unsafe, we are coming closer to. So, and let me say one more thing. I think about the state of the world in terms of the online news media, and now with this whole thing that came out about social media being a conscious and understood effort at stimulating this danger response and this activation response, and how we're all sort of in this false relationship with reality in terms of what's safe and what's not. And so I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, what happens when the signals get crossed?
Right. Well, we kind of have to like loop back, right, to attachment, right? Because that's really where this all gets laid down. And when you say like the vagus nerve, it's like when we come into the world, like, so the vagus nerve, it has to get myelinated, right? And myelination is what allows conductivity in those fibers. Now that happens in relationship, that happens, we don't have that. But if our caregiver has that and we feel safe and they're mirroring and we're seeing their face move and we're hearing their voice and it's prosodic and it's vibratory and they're rocking us and all these good things that happen in attuned, good enough caregiving, that's going to bring that online, right?
Wait, did you say that the vagus nerve gets myelinated through relationship?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And can we include adults in this later on?
Yeah. So we can definitely build this. It's like, if you didn't get this, if I'm, when we talk about attachment, it can always be a little bit like edgy, right? Because so many of us, me included, didn't get that like great attachment scenario where it developed this security, right? Which again is layered. It's not just like, okay, that's why if we think, oh, it's all the vagus nerve, and then we're going to do our biohacks and do our vagus nerve work, that's great. That can help develop tone. But on its own, that's kind of one piece of a larger puzzle. And to reduce it down to like, as long as you've got this pathway on, that means you're going to be securely attached and feel securely attached. It's not really that simple, because the other thing that develops as we're growing is our mind develops through our relationship with the mind of our caregiver. That's our experience of mind, and our mind develops within that. And so if the mind of our caregiver is not integrated, it's going to be a very, very different like template that gets built for our own mind. And then we've got the brain, which is all that circuitry, everything actually working well in an integrated way. that happens when we have that physiological safety. Those pathways can actually start to develop, and within the context of an organized, integrated mind and a coherent mind. And so we've got this like mind, which is that field of our awareness, right? That's not just our brain. And then we've got our nervous system in our brain that has to sort of wire so that it's actually developed in a way where it is interlinked and differentiated in ways that are helpful for us. Yeah, so that develops it has a lot to do with the mind and the nervous system and the sort of the state of our caregiver and their responses to us, how they are with us on a regular basis. So this builds, it's like when we have that matrix of all of that working really well, and we're in this matrix of safety where our mom or our dad or whoever our caregiver is or are, they actually have that matrix right within and around them. And then that's in the family, and then that's in this is like the perfect scenario, which I don't think many of us have had. Then we're in this like, community and in this city and town and world, and that's like this like, ooh, and then all the realms and everything's beautifully working together and it's all integrated. And that's really like, oh, but it's not how it is for most of us in this world. That's the ideal, right? So it just gives us a sense of, oh, wow, what would it be like if we actually felt embedded within ourselves in these, matrix of safety that's built for us, that we don't have to think about, we don't have to like try to regulate ourselves. It's like, there it is. And it's just something that kind of runs our system or is available for us to run on. And then we're within that in our family and in the greater world, just even take a moment to like, what might that feel like? So we have some like kind of that pure reference for what that state would be like. So what I wanted to check in about at this point is because we don't have that, right? Nobody has that. We're in a very unsafe world. It's just true. And a lot of us have had unsafe families or unsafe relationships or really hard, bad, unsafe things that have happened to us, around us, or to those we love, or just in the greater world. So we're not living in that safe matrix externally. So what do we do, right? Especially what do we do if we didn't get it? And then we didn't get that internally, and then we're in this world where we're not getting it externally, then like, is that just a doomed scenario? But the good news is it's not. So,
Glad.
right. So what I wanted to introduce is this idea of inherent internal safety that is in a pure way, not, it's not conditional. Like it's not in relationship to having the perfect relationship or the perfect scenario or the perfect, the world around us or the family that supports us, not to say we don't want those things or that's not optimum or that's not possible to cultivate. But there's this other component that is a little different than safety that's happening around us or for us. And I call that inherent internal safety. And that doesn't mean that we feel safe when things are dangerous, because that's not very functional, right? It's like what Katie was talking about. Like, then we're like gonna move, we don't know, we're gonna move towards the dangerous thing thinking, oh, it's fine, or not recognize what safety is, and that's not, functional for us or healthy, and could get us into some, big messes. So what we want to have that discernment. So, but this feeling or this experience of inherent internal safety, what I'm calling, is this state of integration inside within a range of external circumstances, a range of internal states of emotion, thought, mood, and a range of different, it can even be esoteric states, right? So what does that mean? That's when we kind of loop back to that state of integration, which is things are linked and also differentiated in ways that are really helpful. What that looks like when it's not there is we find ourselves, we might notice, okay, like, we feel like a lot of activation, or maybe a lot of shutdown or collapse or confusion. Like we might feel it in those ways. But the sort of main two sides of this spectrum are chaos and rigidity. So that when we are, Dan Siegel developed the window of tolerance model. And a lot of times we think, or folks think, or use it in a way that it has to do with like levels of arousal, that we're safe if we're in this range of arousal, but if we're out of it, then that means we're out of the window of tolerance. And it's sort of it's a set point or something. And if we're down here, we're out of the window of tolerance. But actually what it means is the range within which we can stay integrated and not go into chaos or rigidity, no matter what regardless of the state. So it could be for some of us, like we get disintegrated and we go into chaos when we're angry, right? We get mad and it's like, we feel like we start to get chaotic inside. That means we feel a bit out of control, our mind gets chaotic, or we keep spinning, or we can't wind down. Or for some of us, it could be
fear and loneliness.
Fear and loneliness, sadness. It could be anything. It could have to do with proximity. Like if we get a certain amount of intimacy, it's hard to stay integrated. We either kind of collapse or going to shut down, or we get afraid, or we get caught in the both of it, right? Where we that disorganized attachment thing. We want to move close, but then and then we're stuck, So those are all examples of either rigidity could just be like we get really closed in our mind. We sort of close down a bit. We get really rigid in our thinking, or we can't think differently. We think the same way. It just sort of like we can't quite get out of our way of seeing things. It could be that we're just become resistant and closed off, and so our world gets smaller. I mean, there's so many ways that there's so many manifestations of chaos, rigidity, or the back and forth between the two. And that is trauma. It kind of in a nutshell is basically trauma are things that happen acutely or over time that have sent us out of this window of tolerance, that we cannot stay integrated within the experience. It's too much for us. It's too much for our physiology. It's too much emotionally. It's too much mentally. We fragment. Our sense of self can't, metabolize what's happening or stay integrated. So we and that can even happen through, spiritual practice, where if we're not able to stay integrated, then, that can be really kind of problematic. And then we lose that harmonious integration, both in our body, but also in our mind, and all these aspects of us. Things start to kind of either split off, so they become more disconnected, or they overcouple and they're overly connected. So we lose that balance of connection and differentiation that we want to have in all these systems working together.
So can I interject for a moment? So first, your description of this model of seeing things as chaos and rigidity makes a lot of sense to me, even thinking about what's going on in the world, right? We see that the more chaos, the more it seems that groups of people tend towards more rigidity. Like, this is my in-group, this is my tribe, we all think the same. That would be an example of the rigidity. And so it's like the chaos and rigidity really also, it's not just that we have a tendency towards one, it's also that they feed off of one another. The other thing I want to ask is, can you and I know we have a couple directions we want to go in, but can you briefly describe to everyone, what do you mean by healthy integration is the capacity to be able to see the interconnection, but also healthy differentiation? Can you give like a regular lady example of how to be healthily integrated and differentiated?
Okay, so, I think there's a couple of levels of this, right? One is not so much like something we're doing, even though we can like, move towards that or kind of do it. But we're there on one level, we're talking about that inherent capacity, that inherent, what we talked about in terms of like the brain being interlinked, but also differentiated and working in a harmonious way. The body system is being interlinked, but differentiated, working in a harmonious way, the different parts of us, so the idea is that having this underlying template that our system knows how to run that way and has a felt sense experience of that and gravitates towards that as kind of its baseline, like it sort of lives more in that range, is sort of the first foundation of it. So when we have to do it, which sometimes we do, right? That's sort of this next step in like, okay, I have to actively bring myself back into, if we're thinking, because there's one that's behaviorally, like it's like, let's say between two people, right? So let's say we are, with a family member and, we're having a conversation and they are, maybe they're upset about something. Maybe they're angry about, something going on in the world. And if we don't have enough differentiation from them, from their emotional world, from their internal world, from their mind, from their body, we might just sort of merge on in with that. And then we're like joining that state. And that's natural. It's not like something that we're doing wrong, but it's not as helpful if that's happening with someone who is just like dysregulated, like they're in chaos, they're in rigidity, they're in fear. It's very contagious. And what I was saying in the beginning, it's meant to be, because if there's a danger, we're supposed to just instinctively feel it and not have to be like, like have it go through, like ripple through the field. And so the vibration just activates our nervous system. We're supposed to work like that. But that's supposed to be acute, that's like was developed as like it happens, but then we're safe, and then it happens and we're safe. And now it's kind of like there's sort of this ongoing, right, signal of that. So we have to kind of be a bit more savvy with what's automatic for us. So like if we're with someone and they're angry, they're upset and they're ranting and they're like, you can see like, wow, they're not very integrated in their state. And then we start kind of joining them, feeling just, we start getting upset, or we have a hard time coming down. We also are not maybe as able to kind of hold space and be with them in a helpful way. And so that's like a way to think about like not enough differentiation, right? So not enough linkage sort of relationally, right, would be like, from a bit more like, most of us know a bit what this feels like, feeling, disconnected or maybe a bit dismissive, not able to feel connected to other people. We're sort of an island unto ourselves. That's going to be a little more on the side of like there's not enough linkage, right? There's that like withdrawal happening, like let's say our partner does something that triggers us, and then we retract and we withdraw and we disconnect. So that's we've lost the linkage. But if we're like merging with them, feeling all their feelings, we can't really find ourselves, we're just like flooded with their experience, there's not enough differentiation. So that's a way to see it kind of in the relational field. But if that's all a response, or that's a symptom, or that happens after it's happened inside. So,
beautiful.
Right. So it's like this thing where we can go from the outside in, but then we're sort of always a bit at the mercy of our environment, which is part of the truth. And that's just reality. But what this idea, what I work with of this, inherent internal safety is to actually work with the active building, if we don't have it, or development, if we have some baseline of it, but we need more of it, of this internal state of integration within us, and increasing our range, so we can hold that lack of chaos and rigidity. We can come into integration and grow our range of how we can hold that. Maybe our range is here. That's for trauma. What happens is our window gets smaller, and all of a sudden it's like we go a little bit out of it and like, wow, or like collapse, right? And we always think it's the thing outside, and it can be. It's not wrong. But especially when we're thinking of like trauma and conditioning and like more PTSD, there can be something relatively benign that can then tag that cascade and throw us out of integration. So it behooves all of us, no matter where we are, no matter how broad or narrow our window is the more range we have in a wider variety of states, situations, we can handle so much more. And that's actually going to prepare us a lot better for the world, right? Being like having to have it all perfect and everything perfect so we feel safe and we can be regulated, it's a great place to start, especially if we haven't had that. If we've never had that, we need to have some experience of what that is. But we want to be moving in an evolutionary way towards being able to be more and more, have a wider range of what we can do, what we can experience without fragmenting, without, going into disintegration. It builds a lot of esteem and confidence in ourselves of like, oh yeah, I can handle really hard things. And it allows us to feel safer in an unsafe world. The more we have, the safer we'll feel, even when things are falling apart, even when things are happening that we don't want to be happening and are really, really hard and are really out of our control, that's life. Like we aren't safe here. In that way where nothing bad's going to happen to us. So I think this is like a preparation for that.
If I can just interject one thing on the importance of what you're saying to highlight it for our group. And there's a deep conversation in our world right now, and it has been ongoing for some time, but highlighted last year around the need for safe spaces. And what you're saying is the justification of why safety is so important. But if we get caught only in the creation of safe spaces, we run the risk of creating a community of young individuals in particular who have no resiliency for the actuality of reality, which is no promises to safety ever. And so what you're saying, I just want to, how much I appreciate this grounded perspective around the primal need for safety in order to heal, while at the same time being able to hold that oppositional and quite uncomfortable truth that the end game isn't constant safety feeling. The end game is that we grow this window of tolerance to be able to truly hold these different states more capaciously. And that's, I think, so missing from the global conversation around left and right, Republican, Democrat, safety snowflakes, or like, sort of macho jerks. It's like there's this middle ground, and I think really important that we be able to hold both of those things.
Well, it's so important, it's like they're really important to have them both, or to understand how they're both really necessary in different ways. I think that's really the thing, because the less safety we've had, the less we have that internal safety wiring template matrix. And some folks on this planet have a lot less than others.
Yeah.
That's true. Like, there's not an even hand. We didn't all get an even hand, And so there's folks that have this, just like, it's like intergenerationally and in their environment and in their family, and it's, I mean, it's like layer upon layer upon layer of like, there, in every matrix, there isn't any safety. So then to say like, okay, you've gotta, you
Fuck
know,
up.
you've gotta like, yeah, like, you know, okay, go ahead and, you know, feel safe no matter what, is sort of like, we'll kind of go, oh, well, that's a little backwards, right? That's sort of like upside down. But then we go, okay, if we're going, okay, like, let's just all, we're going to wrap ourselves in this wonderful, you know, finding as much external safety as possible. Like, oh, if I, you know, my partner is just super attuned, you know, then, and then I'm going to stay home, right? You know, and we're like,
Snuggling blankets.
yeah, and that's like, I mean, I'm a huge fan of all those things. It's great, it's wonderful. But then we're sort of get a little bit stuck too in like, we've got, you know, if our partner's misattuned, it's like we can't hold our integration. If we have an unsafe partner, being able to feel integrated within ourselves gives us a much better ability to then be like, wow, I got to get out of here because this is unsafe. But if we're integrated inside, we can go through the sort of like misattuned, you know, flawed human experience, which we're all in, and it doesn't destroy us. We're not like, oh my God, I got triggered at a party and I didn't sleep for 3 days because that person, like, oh, their energy was bad. And so, you know, I mean, this is like, hear this, and I don't mean to make fun of the truth that happens. Like, if we've got a lot of trauma, it does feel that way. We're like, oh my gosh, like there's somebody has a bit of they could be dangerous, or maybe it tags that feeling of safety, and then our bodies, and we're just like, oh my God, this is more than I can handle. And then, you know, we're the ones that are suffering, you know, and so it's this combination of, I'm a huge advocate for like, man, it's best of a safe world we can create, the best we can be safe with each other, the best environments, you know, for everybody. Like, yeah, let's have that. And as we're like trying to chug our way there in whatever way we each can, to then help the whole collective have more of this, you know, and do our contribution to create safety in as many ways as we can. You know, while we're doing that, we're building this internal resilience. So we have a feeling inside of our own inherent, safety is going to allow us to do that better. Because then we're not just like doing it out of like anger or fear or, division. We're doing it from a place that, okay, I'm integrated. I'm going to have a much better ability to actually live my purpose in the world, see things more clearly, have a better perspective, and I can handle more. So I can go out there and do more because I'm not like need to be wrapped in, like cotton all the time and like be okay. And I'm not saying that in any judgmental way. I've had periods in my life where I'm like, come on, like wrap me up in the cocoon. And and then it's like we get our healing, and then it's like, okay, I build that, and then I've got more of that, and then hopefully I have a little, I can hold that in a larger range. And there was a time when my range was like, pretty much non-existent. So I don't say this as a that's judging, just as a way of we're in this, it's not the whole story. We want to take that, and that's and this leads us, I think, into this, what I was talking with Katie about before, about the developmental arc of this. So it's very appropriate as a baby to be wrapped in perfect safety. It's supposed to happen like that. We're supposed to have it like that. It's not supposed to be like, buck up, little one. Like, we're meant to be just held in the sacred, safety of the universe and in our family, and held in every level. So we do feel the absolute perfect safety. And then our brains, our bodies, our minds, our spirit develops within that. As we get older, that's where this building into more and more, we have to go little slowly more and more into the world. If we get what we need along the way to build, right, more and more and more integration at larger and larger ranges, that's really the developmental process. If it all goes well, it all goes perfectly, which for many of us did not, or got interrupted, something happened and it derailed us. It could be so many different ways this occurs. But the developmental arc is a building and a maturation of this into more and more, like, I can be in the world, I can hold more in terms of my own internal experience, and be more and more in the world. And as we're adults, we haven't had that, and we're having to sort of like, we want to build this internal matrix within us, and we have to go through the developmental process now. Like, we have to build the secure attachment developmental process at this point. So we do have to start from a place where we like can access that perfect, pure feeling of sacred safety. And then from there, that gives us what we need to actually start to then get the brain wiring and the body wiring and all parts of us start to be able to feel, like, every aspect of us, when we feel that safety, that sacred, perfect safety that we, if we perfectly would have had, it's like everything develops within that. Every aspect of us thrives, right? So when we're doing it now, we want to start from that, what should have happened, that perfect seed, let that ripple through our system, let that inform all our system. And then we grow, and then we go to the next step, developmentally. So this thing about being integrated and feeling safe within us in an unsafe world, that's like way down, that's developmentally far down the pike. It's not where we start. That's why if we ask for people to have that when it's not there at all, we're doing people a really big disservice, and it's not compassionate, and it's harmful. It's really harmful to do that. It's a flipping it the other way. So we have to then say, okay, build as much safety so we get this online in whatever way we can. Then there's something inside that can start to grow. And then the safety nets, the external safety nets can kind of be loosening a little bit, because the safety net inside is like way stronger and more developed, So safety inside, what I'm describing is about, I can be safe within myself, in my own experience, my own feelings, these different states, these thoughts, these things that happen. I can feel safe inside of my relationship with myself. It doesn't mean I feel safe in this moment. It could be like that predator type person at the party where, like, oh, this guy's really creepy, or he's just bad boundaries, or, oh, I don't like this conversation. It's like, oh, and we can be like, yep, this, I don't like it. I don't want to be close to this person. I want to move away from this person. But we're integrated within ourselves in the feeling of, this feels dangerous. I don't like this. I want to move away. And I feel integrated within myself having this feeling. Then I can respond by being like, putting up a boundary. I can stand there for a few moments and be, say, oh, I got to go to the toilet. Go, or just say, hi, nice talking to you, and leave. Whatever it is, if we get disintegrated and we get rigid or chaotic, it's going to be a lot harder to respond in ways that are actually helpful for us, and that are more protective for us and support our well-being. So it's like this relationship between the internal and external safety that gets a lot easier to do when our relationship with ourselves is one where we feel safe to experience this range of states, emotions, feelings, and experiences.
Yeah, and what it brings up for me, and I know we want to give everyone an experience, so I want to make sure we have time for that, Cristal, but the language that you use is very helpful. This sort of idea of developmentally, what this might look like, provides a path forward instead of an either or idea. And the other thing that comes to mind is the beautiful way in which the state of what you call integration, that I've asked her many times to now, Cristal, define integration for me. And, but that's really what you've taught me, is this sort of male lodge, right? Like this masculine way of needing to kind of contextualize everything with my prefrontal cortex. But when I drop into it experientially, when I feel safe and I feel integrated with the truth of who I really am, it is the exact same experience of being with the divine. And I'm wondering if we can maybe move in that direction. And by the way, before we move in that experiential, I want to tell the students that Cristal, I'm so glad she's here and you guys are getting to experience her, because this is just a teeny taste of her brain and it's pretty vast, as you guys are seeing. And so we're having her back in November. Some of you have gotten the email and some of you haven't, but Sarah's going to put the link in the chat. We're having Cristal back in November to do a full 3-hour workshop on this stuff. So if you're like, oh my God, I feel like I'm just, coming into this whole new understanding and I want to know more, we're going to do 3 hours on it in November. So this is kind of a jumping off point. But maybe as we start to move towards the last section of this talk, Cristal, the relationship between our connection to the divine and this safety piece, and then maybe you can walk us through a mini safety practice.
Yeah. Okay. I'll try to be succinct, because this is actually the most important part.
Okay.
Everything else is like just the setup to like understand sort of this, what we're doing or why we're doing it. So it has this larger context of why it matters, and how it can apply. But this is actually the part that's the best, the most important, and the most exciting is, so when we talk about this developmental arc and starting at the beginning and having that pure felt sense experience of safety, if we're trying to do that as an adult, it's very hard to get that from another human. It doesn't matter if they're a therapist or our partner or a friend or a family or a guru or whoever it is, or a teacher, right? It is like it's going to be inherently flawed because we're in the human realm, right? So people are fallible and we can do our best, but it's not the same as that. We talked about that, like that seed, that perfect, pure safety that then is this, like, it lights up this internal template for us. That then it's like it ignites something that's dormant in us. Okay. So if we try to do that just relationally, it can be a little bit clunkier and we get a little bit disappointed. It can kind of not quite work. So what I do is, what I've developed is this practice, what I call secure attachment, sacred attachment. So the sacred attachment work is actually working with bringing in these more pure, kind of unconditional supports, safety figures from these other realms. And that is going to be unique to each of us, because we all have a very unique personal connection to guides that are there for us, to the divine, whatever way that's like kind of like lights up for us. Could be like animal protectors, sacred animal figures. It could be archetypes. It could be angels. It could be just like certain kind of like types of energies or teachers that have passed. Spiritual figures. There's this huge array of this really pure divine support that is invisible. Some of us have more of like seeing, right? But for many of us, especially if we're starting with this, it can be a feeling of like, it's like, how do I find that, right? But the idea is that that's actually all there for us. So to create this link where we start to invite this level of sacred safety in and experience this in this pure realm, and then let that be a felt sense experience. It can usually starts a little more energetically. A lot of the times that's kind of how we're going to link into that, because it's not so much material, but it's like a subtler perception that we're slowly kind of dropping into in order to sense, call in, and then make this link from these other realms to us, that then when we start to feel that, we do come into that sort of sacred, like kind of cocoon type of a protective experience, that then our physiology and our brain, our emotions, all of us are then getting like fed with that and being informed by that. And then it becomes this felt sense experience. So I wanna, and there's so much more. I mean, that's just like such a, as we all know, it's just this teeny little, like very inadequate explanation, you know, and I know you're all on a spiritual path, so you probably already have this, a sense of this in your life on some level, or maybe a really deep feeling of personal connection. So for some of you it might be like, oh yeah, like I do that all the time. I've had that for years, and you know, I have angels around me and I feel them all the time. And some of us are more like, you know, like I know it's there, but we might not have been able to ignite this system that I'm talking about inside, that actually then translates into our body, you know, in our physiology, so that all the systems are then like informed by this, and then we can take it forward with us. Okay, so you know, I'll tell a little story and then talk us through an exercise, if that's okay. Yeah, okay. So this morning, as I was sitting and preparing for being here with all of you, and you know, I live on the water and facing east, so I get to see the sunrise every day, which is really fortunate. So I sat down on my steps and looked out, and you know, I had been up for a little while, and you know, kind of making breakfast and all of that, taking care of the bunny, feeding the bunny, you know, all those things little by little. And slowly there was, you know, I could see in the background, there's like, you know, a little bit of, you know, went from being dark to like slowly kind of light sort of filtering in different colors. And I would sort of every once in a while, you know, kind of look out the window and, oh yeah, there's little pinks and whatnot. And so when I was then sitting down to prepare for meeting all of you, I sat down because I saw there was a cloud on the horizon, and I could see like, oh, there's like a little bit of a, like I could see the sun was going to come up soon. And so I said, oh, I want to sit down and be with this. And, you know, I could feel sitting there the sense of both this anticipation of like, I can see the signs, these little, like the little glow on the cloud, you know, and then there'd be like a little more, like the rays would come out. And I just knew inside of me, the sun's coming. Like I wasn't unsure. I didn't have any doubt the sun was coming up, even though I couldn't see the sun just yet. But everything in me just had this deep knowing and faith that, of course, the sun's there and it's coming, and it's coming for me. It's coming, you know, and when I was experiencing this, I thought, oh, this is what I'm teaching. This is it right here. You know, is this when we're working with cultivating this access to the divine and to these sacred supports that can come in for us, that is the state that gets stronger and stronger the more we do this work, is to sit quietly and find the place in us where there's some place of knowing or hope, or even just the hint of possibility that it maybe could possibly happen in some way at some point. And then we're in this, you know, getting quiet enough to have enough of this being patient and waiting and asking and inviting. And then we wait for the subtlest sign first. And then sometimes it's like the bright colors come and the sun comes out and it's spectacular and it's immediate. Other times it's this slow glow. Sometimes it's behind the cloud for a really long time, but we just kind of know, like we see a little bit of something that lets us know it's there somehow. And the more we sit with whatever signs, just this waiting, and the longing, right? There's this longing, this wanting of that. And then the asking, the inviting in. And then the like, okay, feeling and feeling for the subtlest signs. And then we just kind of call that closer and closer and closer to us. It becomes more and more felt. And so, and I'm sure most of you know this, or you're going, yeah, like I do this all the time, or this is how I do my practice. And I can feel that. I can feel that we're all, there's this knowing in the group, experiential knowing. And so I'd like us to, I feel like starting with, I was going to start with more, kind of sacred invocation imagery. But I actually was thinking, I like this idea this morning when this came out, I thought this is actually a better jumping off point, because there's an inherent knowing we all have that the sun is there. None of us question it. Well, I don't know, maybe there might be a faction of people that I shouldn't say nobody, because it's possible. So there might be somebody that's, has a different, idea about it. But for most of us, there's just this inherent knowing. The sun is there. I know it's there. I have faith in it. If it's nighttime, I don't think the sun is never coming back. I don't think it's gone. I know it's there. If it's behind a cloud or behind a building, or if I'm inside and I can't see it. And that's a really fruitful place to start to feel, to anchor into when we're working with this connection, because sometimes it can feel like, where is it? Or how do I find it? Or I feel disconnected, especially when things are hard, right? When we're suffering and we feel alone and we don't feel connected. And what I've learned is that when that's happening, actually, there's so much more support that comes in. It's just harder for us to access it and feel it. But the more, it's like, whoosh, it's really there. So if we can sort of tap into some of this feeling of that sort of stability of knowing the sun is there, that's the feeling we want to start bringing into this other connection to the divine. So I was hoping we could start with that and then use that as a bit of our jumping off point to calling in, sacred support that feels safe, that gives us a feeling of safety. Yeah. Okay. All right. So why don't we start with this practice?
All right, everybody, if you want to do that practice with us and hear the rest of Cristal's amazing lecture, you're going to need to join us. Spirit School, Spirit Session, Spirit Elevation. That's what we're all about, y'all. This is a time when the world actually does need love, light, and all those good things so that we can process and digest all the darkness. Yep. It's both here. So head over, link is in the show notes, and become a part of our community.
Beautiful.